Nintendo seems to know exactly what their fans want this month, and apparently, it's more Nintendo 64 games. That's right, Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pack subscribers now have access to 3 more Nintendo 64 games, including 1080 Degrees Snowboarding, Harvest Moon 64, and the previously announced Jet Force Gemini. That's exciting news, but are any of these games actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Next Generation, Computer and Video Games, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. So get ready to do a lot of farming and maybe shake that weird feeling of deja vu, because it's time for another exciting episode of Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew.
Well, Gary, you thumbless wonder, what Nintendo sports game would you like to lose today?
There's Fox College Hoops featuring me whipping Gary's rumpa.
1080, Gary breaks a leg snowboarding.
NFL Blitz, Gary on a stretcher.
WCW versus NWO versus Gary begging and pleading on his knees, weeping and crying like a...
What?
Nintendo Sports, what friends are for.
With the holiday season in full swing, chances are good that you're looking for a cozy game that is equal parts fun and comforting. That's the perfect way to describe the first game we're going to talk about today, Harvest Moon 64, the sequel to one of the Super Nintendo's most addictive farming games. The 64-bit version gives us more of everything that we loved about the 16-bit original, only now with the brand new ability to get married and even have children. Sure, the setup involving a dead relative who leaves you their farm would be familiar to pretty much anybody who's played this franchise before, but this version does a good job of streamlining the experience and making it easier than ever for new players to get hooked on its charm. Let's see if the critics like the Nintendo 64 sequel more than the Super NES original. When it came to Electronic Gaming Monthly, the editors were still a little cold on the whole concept of a life simulator. They gave the 64-bit sequel an average score of 7.6 out of 10, down half a point from the original's 8.1 average. Crispin sums it up this way: Harvest Moon is definitely one of those love it or hate it kind of games. It's a bit tedious, it's unconventional. It's a farming dating sim for crying out loud. But its cutesy gameplay is just the sort of thing that'll attract new types of gamers. Kids will love it, sure, but girls will probably dig this too. Here's a game that you can play with your girlfriend. Che agreed, arguing that Harvest Moon is one of those Twilight titles that'll go tragically unnoticed to most RPG fans out there. That's a shame, because Harvest Moon 64 has all the charm and warmth missing from a lot of games. Buy it for your girlfriend. Now, EGM score isn't all that far off from the 7.25 out of 10 that we saw from Game Informer, which is definitely on the low side of the review scores. Most of the critics were in the 80% range, such as a 8.2 out of 10 from Nintendo Power. For their part, Hyper gave the game an 83%, concluding that in some strange unfathomable way, Harvest Moon 64 is very addictive indeed. Even though you hand your sword and shield for a scythe and watering can, the blend of interaction, exploration, money-making, and mini-games makes this title unique to say the least. Kudos for the developers straying off the beaten path of tried and tired formulas of video games and breathing fresh air into the industry. There were higher scores, of course, including N64 Magazine in the UK, which gave the game an 84%. The top score I could find came from GameFan, with Ego giving it an 89%. Fellow sausages, what have I become? What kind of world do we live in where my tastes now coincide with Shidoshi? Is Sailor Moon really not that bad? Will I someday be standing in line at a store to buy a copy of Seaman? Shaking head to clear the cobwebs, no, this can't be. I swear, this will be the last Shidoshi game that I like. It's time to crush somebody in NFL 2000 or Soul Calibur. Okay, so between EGM's constant talk about this being a good girlfriend game, and now a game fan editor all but questioning his masculinity, these reviews have not aged particularly well. Guys, there's no reason to balance things out with football and fighting. Just play what you want to play and have fun. And you know what? You're definitely going to have a lot of fun when you check out Harvest Moon 64 on the Switch. Having already conquered both 3D platformers with Banjo-Kazooie and first-person shooters with GoldenEye 007, there was really only one thing left for Rare to do, and that's to combine the two genres. Released in 1999 on the Nintendo 64, Jet Force Gemini sees our spacey hero run, jump, swim, and even hang from ledges as he battles his way through a bunch of exciting and imaginative science fiction-themed stages. The combination of platforming and third-person shooting was definitely novel at the time and would later go on to inspire a number of other action games, including the entire Ratchet & Clank franchise. These days, the reception to Jet Force Gemini has been somewhat mixed, with some arguing that it was a rare misstep for the company, all while IGN called it one of the best N64 games ever. But we're not here to see what some website said, because this is a show that's all about classic magazines. Now, if you were expecting nothing but rave reviews, then think again. Much like its legacy today, the critics were a bit mixed when it came to Jet Force Gemini. Well, let's go ahead and start with Electronic Gaming Monthly, where it averaged a disappointing 7.75 out of 10. Shu gave it one of the lower scores, arguing that when Rare is in charge of a project, you know that it won't just be something small and insignificant. This action-adventure game is humongous, with lots to see and do. Buy this game for the single-player experience, but don't expect much multiplayer-wise. Even with a myriad of options, multiplayer Jet Force Gemini is really boring after a few sessions. Sean liked it a bit more, concluding that Jet Force Gemini doesn't have the kind of impact you'd expect from a Rare game at first, but after some time, it's easy to see what separates Jet Force Gemini from the others. It isn't without flaws, though. A lack of variety in enemy types, a flaky camera, and unintuitive control can get annoying. Still, it's another Rare gem. Of course, there were other magazines like Game Informer that agreed with Electronic Gaming Monthly's score, but most were either a lot higher or a lot lower. For example, we saw the notoriously grumpy Next Generation give Jet Force Gemini a score of 3 out of 5 and make the case that Rare would have been a lot better leaving some of this on the cutting room floor. Like a lengthy, bloated Hollywood movie, Jet Force Gemini loses entertainment value by exhausting gamers long before the mega journey is over. If this was half as long, it would have been twice as good. Without a doubt, any respecting gamer should buy this game to witness the result of Rare's Herculean effort. But don't even entertain the idea of completing the game unless you have the patience of a saint, and over twice as much time as it took to finish Zelda. If you're looking for the more positive reviews, then you have a few to choose from. Insight gave the game a 4 out of 5 in their first issue, and Edge found it in their heart to give the game a surprisingly strong 9 out of 10. That's the same score we saw from Nintendo Power. Scott made the case that it's very challenging and very big. The best pure action game ever for the N64. Kyle agreed, calling the AI the most tenacious I've seen, while Nate concluded that there's more multiplayer than you can shake a stick at. Now, if you're wondering who gave Jet Force Gemini the highest score, then you must be new to this series, because the answer is obviously GamePro. Giving it a perfect 5 out of 5, Air Hendricks explains that Jet Force Gemini is another fine example of why Rare is one of gaming's best developers. Spectacular graphics and sound combine with deep, gripping gameplay to make Jet Force a must-own action-adventure experience. You know, personally speaking, I found myself agreeing with Next Generation on this one. There are a lot of elements here that just don't hold up in 2023, and I think you're gonna find that there's way too much filler in this game. That said, the game is definitely fun for a long time, and it's worth a look, especially if you're a Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack subscriber that's been waiting for a meaty release. You aren't gonna get much meatier than this one.
おいでおいでおいで。はい。ループスループスループスループス。この犬はループスと言いましてね、非常に珍しい種類なんです。ほら、よーく見てください。背中に武器を背負ってますね。虫を撃つ習性があるんですね。プンプンプンプン。よーしよしよし、ここでも撃ってますね。
任天堂64スターツインズ新登場。
鼻舐めてるよ。
While Nintendo may be known for their cartoony sports games starring Mario and his friends, the company actually has a rather impressive lineup of more realistic sports titles. One of the most memorable was the 1080° Snowboarding series, which started on the Nintendo 64 before getting a GameCube sequel in 2003. This debut installment takes us to some of the snowiest and most treacherous locations in the world and then gives us a good push, sending players screaming down a mountain at breakneck speeds, all while dodging trees, rocks, and other snowboarders. In a world where good snowboarding games were few and far between, 1080° Snowboarding was yet another great addition to the Nintendo 64 library. Electronic Gaming Monthly agreed with pretty much everything that I said in my description, giving the game an average score of 8.4 out of 10. John started his review by making the obvious comparison that 1080° Snowboarding is like an icy equivalent to Wave Race 64, but with less courses and a much steeper and potentially frustrating learning curve. The graphics are beautiful and the control is almost perfect, but with only 6 courses total and a select few secrets to open up, you'll be begging for more after just a few days of play. Dan agreed, giving the game a slightly lower 7.5 out of 10. 1080 is a decent game. The game has solid graphics, intuitive control, and lots of variety. But a little more variety would have helped. The half-pipe is the only event I really loved. Doing tricks is the best part of this game. Once again, this 80% range seems to be the sweet spot for the snowboarding simulator. Edge liked the game enough to give it a solid 8 out of 10 in their 57th issue. Nintendo Power liked it a bit more, giving it an 8.5 out of 10. For their part, Computer and Video Games gave the sports game a 4 out of 5, with Alex arguing that compared to other boarding games on the market, 1080° is definitely the king. Not only in looks, but more importantly in the way it plays and feels. From the moment you pick your boarder at the lodge, you know this game is special. It's not a perfect game, and one that is fairly easy to beat, so I won't give it top marks. But until the next boarding game comes along, this is the current daddy. Now this would normally be the point of the show where I would just go and read GamePro's perfect 5 out of 5 review. But you know what? We're not going to do that today. Instead of giving their overly kind critics even more coverage, I would rather end this episode with the notoriously grumpy next generation getting the final word. Giving 1080 a perfect 5-star rating, they concluded that all in all, the excellent feel and wealth of features easily made us cast a charitable blind eye to the relatively low number of courses and occasional pop-up and clipping. With 1080° Snowboarding, Nintendo delivers another system seller and once again sets the standard for an entire genre. Yeah, the relative lack of courses is definitely one of those problems that kept popping up, but it shouldn't be too big of an issue on the Nintendo Switch. Just go in knowing that while fun, 1080° Snowboarding isn't exactly the deepest Nintendo 64 game coming out this week. Yeah, this is easily one of the best snowboarding games currently on the Switch, which sadly isn't saying a lot.
When I decided to train for this, I heard it all. Jehu, you fool, this is the desert. Jehu, it's 110 degrees, crazy things. I practice around 5-6 hours a day with the rumble pack. On the slopes, in the half-pipe, Jehu is there. It's very spiritual. Just you and the mountain, and the snowboard, and the game.
1080 Snowboarding, only on Nintendo 64. Real close to the real thing.
I warn you, snowboarders, watch out for Jehu!
Hey, thanks for watching us break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes just about every time Nintendo adds old school games to their online service. We have a whole playlist with dozens of these episodes, so give that a binge when you have a free afternoon or something. Now, here's the question I have for you. What game are you going to cozy up with this holiday season? It doesn't have to be one of these games, obviously. I just want to know what game's going to keep you warm this December. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back next week with reviews of Evil Nun and a Highland story. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,